Hello, and welcome back to the Thinking Progressive podcast. I'm your host, Ron Rivers, and in this week's recording, we're going to revisit an older essay titled Responsible Democracy and the Future. The concept is simple. For democracy to work, we need it to be active. For it to be active, we need to change the way we operate. For too long, elected leadership from all parties have worked to suppress the vote and candidate information. This has been accomplished through several methods that we're going to discuss. Thank you for listening to the Thinking Progressive podcast. The Democratic Republic established in the United States was a revolutionary concept of what the human experience could be at that present time. A nation comprised of smaller sub-nations, states, each acting as a laboratory of experimentation for different ways of being in accordance to the desires and needs of the constituents. Elected representatives would meet together to work on policies, programs, and legislation that would help further the interests of the citizens they represented while putting the greater good of the nation first. Representative democracy was a necessary feature of our government at the time of its inception because both resources and information traveled very slowly by today's standards. Fast forward 240 years and we can observe the unintended consequences that have arisen from our institutions, one of the most dangerous being a lazy and reactive democracy. By shifting our institutional structures to support and empower a more responsible and more proactive democracy that encourages the participation of the individual, we would make a significant leap in transitioning the United States towards the next stage of our economic, technological, political, and social progression. Elected misrepresentation. Representative democracy in its current state has failed to achieve its intended goal mainly due to the individuals who choose to run for office and their reliance on both corporate and private donations to become elected. What was designed to be a system of fair, just, and thoughtful representation has become a battle between different sponsored ideals and policies intended to benefit the moneyed interests that invest in the candidates. There are candidates in office today who openly support policies that are both harmful to and unaligned with the best interests of their constituents. This is especially true in America's most impoverished regions, as explained in Thomas Frank's book, What's the Matter with Kansas? He said, and I quote, "You vote to strike a blow against elitism, and you receive a social order in which wealth is more concentrated than ever before. It's like a French Revolution in reverse, in which the workers come pouring down the street and start screaming, 'More power to the aristocracy!'" So how did we end up in our current scenario of having to convince the poorest members of our society that the concentration of wealth and cutting of social programs is harmful to them? The quality of education given in these sections of our population has played a significant role in manifesting our current situation. According to statistician and Columbia University professor Howard Friedman, the link between poverty and education can be seen at all educational levels. From the earliest stage, that is pre-primary education, poorer Americans start disadvantaged. The data we have available demonstrates that poverty is linked to poor education and that education is directly linked to future earning potential. Education faces a systemic challenge in the United States that creates a self-perpetuating system of poverty, resulting in the oppression of opportunity for our poorest citizens. Programmatically, the problem is a result of linking school funding with local municipality taxes, most often property taxes. Nearly half of the property taxes in the United States are used to fund our primary and secondary educational institutions. It's no surprise that the poorest regions have the lowest performing schools, which produce lower performers than schools in wealthy areas, which in turn limits their earning potential and ability to contribute more in taxes for better schools. It really results in a repeating cycle of both poverty and reduced earning potential. it would be logical to conclude that representatives from our poorest states would be fighting for programmatic agendas that would fundamentally reimagine the educational institutions within the United States. One possible solution could be the decoupling of education from municipal taxes, drawing the funds instead from a national program that coordinates deeply with state and local levels. So again, federal funding of education. Instead, we observe the opposite. The 2018 House funding bill cut $2.3 billion from the United States Department of Education, with the current administration's proposed tax plan cutting another $3.6 billion. Defying logic, the most prominent supporters of these cuts are elected representatives from our poorest rural areas. One of my favorite scholars, Roberto Mangiabera-Unger, often talks about how education is the cornerstone of a successful democracy. And it's just one example of many potential scenarios that all point to the same conclusion. Relying on elected representatives to act in the best interest of their collective constituent base is no longer a viable option. These actions are supported to some extent because Americans as a collective have become complacent and lazy with our democratic responsibilities. It is essential that we recognize that all Americans own this problem, not just our poorest members. It's easy to turn a blind eye to the strife of fellow citizens when we are not sharing their challenges. However, if there's a lesson to be learned from our current circumstance, it is that there are numerous external factors such as purchasing of representatives to third-party agents and organizations who benefit from sowing discord among our national population. This discord poisons the minds of well-meaning individuals who are just looking for an opportunity to be more human, to live a life of opportunity without the constant stress of being economically disadvantaged by design. The path forward should be a more responsible approach to democracy focused on a higher degree of institutionalized collaboration among the states instead of the current competitive model practiced today. More democracy. In times of social and political unrest like the present, it is easy to seek more extreme measures as solutions. We observe this in the current political climate, with ideologies arising to support authoritarianism on the right and socialism on the left. Taken to their highest degree, these solutions are economically impractical and politically impossible, although as we can observe, the current administration is certainly trying. What is left is the most practical pathway to success, which also happens to provide the least resistance. That solution is more democracy. To put democratic participation in the United States into perspective, we can observe recent data. In the 2016 presidential election, a little over 55% of eligible voters chose to cast a vote, the lowest percentage since 1996. More recently, in my home state of New Jersey, our gubernatorial election turnout was 37%. When we view our participation through a global lens, the United States ranks 28th out of 35 nations, including in the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development study, most of whose members are highly developed democratic states. Internationally, Belgium had the highest participatory rate in its most recent election at 87%, followed by Turkey at 84% and Sweden at 82%. Note that in both Belgium and Turkey, citizens are required to vote by law. If we desire to create a more responsible democracy, we must empower more individuals to participate by making information and access easier and more convenient. This can be achieved through legislative and technical innovations. Legislatively, the United States lags behind other advanced democracies in how we prepare our citizens for elections. Advanced democracies such as Sweden incorporate automatic voter registration at the age of 18. We could make Election Day a national holiday for all individuals, with the caveat of mandatory voting legislation that assigns monetary penalties for not participating, like those implemented in Australia. If we hate the idea of an additional national holiday, we could follow in the footsteps of countries like Austria, Belgium, France, Germany, India, New Zealand, and others who hold elections on either weekends or holidays. While they aren't solutions for our lazy democracy, these legislative changes would open the door for more individuals to participate in local elections without fear of missing work and administrative requirements. Legislation could be accompanied by nationally sponsored and locally organized educational campaigns, providing materials to schools and local organizations. Increasing participation is a requirement of a more responsible democracy, and legislative changes based on other prosperous democracies are an excellent place to start. While legislation is a substantial initial step in the right direction towards a responsible democracy, its impact pales in comparison to the potential that modern technology could create within the United States. Technology has the potential to disrupt the most oppressive and corrupt aspects of our current representative democracy: money. Organizations around the United States are experimenting with innovative methods of increasing citizen engagement via apps and websites. In understanding the lazy democracy dilemma, we must focus our efforts on allowing citizens to participate via a path of least resistance. One example would be a nonprofit called the Our Society Experiment, which, full disclosure, I was the founder of the Our Society Experiment. At Our Society, we were working on creating a free and open election campaign platform with the intention of eliminating the financial barriers to entry that come with running a political campaign at the local level. We believe that removing the financial requirements to run for office will empower more individuals than ever before to run for elected office, from the hyper-local to the national stage. Our work also included the development of a social value matching algorithm, which allowed even the most disinterested voter to make better decisions in the voting booth based on their own values. It's a Likert scale algorithm using questions to determine a value profile for the individual that's private, and then matches them with the candidate's value profile. This empowers more voters to make decisions based on the issues that are important to them, not arbitrary political parties. Finally, we aggregate the anonymous data to identify potential trends for cooperation among the populace and share our research with the public. These efforts focus on a path of least resistance to encouraging democratic participation, agency in decision-making, and cooperative social projects. Critics of our concepts may suggest that the value matching fosters an even lazier democracy, but that argument assumes that the only path to responsible democracy is a 0 to 60 leap into engagement, which is both unlikely and improbable from a solution-driven standpoint. Our Society is just one of many organizations out there using technology to solve civic engagement issues, but no matter which solution ends up being adopted by the masses, the future of democracy depends on the merging of technology to empower more participation. This is key to the success of the progressive agenda, and a concept that, if wholly embraced, will allow us to reach more individuals than competing ideologies. The argument for a more participatory and engaged democracy is a progressive vision when compared to the current state of the Union. However, it should be presented as a central position. Regardless of ideologies, the belief in the potential of American democracy is deeply rooted within the populace. The progressive path forward should be framed under a vision of a more cooperative and collaborative world. Merging our social institutions with technology to remove barriers to participation, connect individuals deeply, and create a more collective vision forward while still enabling the states to act as laboratories of experimentation. A collaborative civic empowerment project focused on building a more responsible and participatory democracy could transcend ideological barriers and present an opportunity for a tangible collective victory for all Americans. While the progressive agenda has a long path forward, focusing on small collaborative projects is a great way to open the eyes of individuals across the United States to the concept that we have more in common than we're given credit for, and united, we can achieve more than we ever could divided.